Now we're going to start the panel discussion for our workplace wellness track. I'm pleased to announce our panel moderator, who is going to be my colleague Oluwatosin Olabode, who's going to guide this discussion within a distinguished group of panelists. So thank you guys for being here. So Olu, you're on, man.
Thank you so much. I think that we can add Mr. Victor to this panel to make the conversation complete. So just spotlight him into the conversation. One thing that stood out for me as the summary of everything that he said is that we have to, in our workspaces and in the different endeavors that we do, experience well-being while being productive. So it shouldn't be either or because we know more as well. You will approach this panel discussion for the next few minutes. Chime, welcome. I would like to start with you. Considering that the World Health Organization reports that 20% of Nigerian population suffer from some form of mental conditions, what is the institutional cost of ignoring the pressure to always be online in the workspaces? When the keynote was speaking, he mentioned a lot about the consequences of stress. So I just wanted you to speak from that perspective. Thank you.
Yes, good morning, everyone. First of all, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you. And I'm so glad to be here. I'm excited by the conversations that have happened today. So I want to thank the speakers of the Living Digitally Well in Africa. This is an important conversation. And I also want to really start with Dr. Dickson's comments earlier, which really struck me when we're talking about this trifecta around meaning, safety, and growth. And I think that there's something that's really elevated there, which is around the things in the workplace that are outside of productivity, which I think we often elevate. And this is not something that's unconscious. This is not something that is vague. This is something that is institutional. And I think it's important that we de-link those things. And I say it's institutional when we describe this question about the World Health Organization, because even the World Health Organization does it. If you look about well-being and mental health, the actual definition from the World Health Organization is mental health is a state of well-being where an individual realizes their own abilities, copes with the normal stresses of life, works productively, and contributes to their community. So even the World Health Organization really elevates this idea of productivity. I think that we need to think beyond productivity when it comes to well-being. And so there's other definitions of mental health that I think we need to elevate and really reinforce what is important in terms of wellness in the workplace. For instance, the Center for Disease Control defines mental health as a state of emotional, psychological, and social well-being that impacts how an individual thinks, feels, acts, handles stress, relates to others, and make choices. You notice in that definition, there's nothing about productivity there. It's all about how you think, how you act, how you relate to others. And those things elevate things around that Dr. Dickson said around meaning, safety, and growth, right? Not about productivity, not necessarily about the output, because if you find meaning, you might deliver more, but it's not necessarily a correlation, right? Or if you find safety, you might have that in individual trust. So I think that those things are very important and often not discussed in the workplace. And if we reimagine these as elevating our relation and our experience in the workplace, we'll have a lot different type of experience. Now, when it comes to digitally on the continent, we have to understand that now in the modern workforce, you know, work is following people everywhere, whether it's on WhatsApp messages at 10 p.m., whether it's Slack notifications during dinner. There's always a quiet appearance to appear that you're available. That green dot that says you're available really becomes a performance commitment. Constant availability comes with things like burnout, distraction, and the inability to really to sustain focus. The World Health Organization actually estimates that this type of emotional exhaustion translates to things like depression, anxiety, cost the global economy $1 trillion in things like lost productivity as we think about that, because people are constantly reacting to messages, and they never really have those zones of deep thinking that produce real innovation. So instead of doing the meaningful work that they should be spending their days on, they are not really putting things together like they should. There's insight and research from indigenous organizations on the continent like Space Finish. Space Finish is a Pan-African design agency that specializes in creating high-performance workspaces for companies like Google and Flutterwave on the continent. And they highlight the lack of boundaries that are created in digital workspaces now create a kind of cognitive fatigue. Their research shows that if an environment fails to provide reset points for the brain, then the institutional pays a price where you can't reflect, where you can't think in terms of relation. So now in our African workplaces, we have a strange paradox. People are always online and connected, but they're rarely doing their best work because they always feel like they are on call. So to combat this, one of the strategies successful organizations are moving is beyond downstream fixes like just providing therapy apps or redesign it, but they're redesigning the work themselves. Some organizations are implementing things called deep work zones and policies that prioritize focus output over constant visibility or connection. And so you can really reclaim productivity that's lost in that culture, like beginning that by really indicating that productivity doesn't come by constant visibility, but it comes from protected focus, trust, psychological safety. And these are really the most important things an organization can do to allow people to create the space where they allow to disconnect long enough to think. That allows them to reflect and put together some of the best finishes when it comes to, and we can't ignore this in the workplace. We need to make sure that we invest in our people in that way.
Absolutely. Yeah, so spot on in everything that you said. And while you were speaking, I was just picking back to what Mr. Victor shared across those 4 key areas of energy, trust, safe energy, meaning safety and growth. Before I come to you, Kelvin, I just wanted to ask Mr. Victor, in the context of creating safe spaces, in the context of creating those deep work environments, what effect does that have on our brain, and what's the benefits to us as employers and employees and to the organization? Because I think a lot of times organizations focus more on the bottom line, like you rightly alluded, rather than the people that provide to that bottom line. So if an organization is able to create these deep spaces and they allow people to work unrestricted within the focus structures that they've been able to build, what does that do to a person's brain, and the consequence of that to the bottom line of the organization and the people they're in?
Oh, okay, thank you so much. And then Chima, thank you so much for even highlighting that further. I really appreciate that. I think I'll be answering I recently just released it. This is called the Nigerian Emotional Map. And what took me into this as a leader and a trainer in the field in performance management, oftentimes we get to ask ourselves questions. Why are we not getting the kind of results we expect to get? You see those who are highly talented, as you may call, highly skilled, very, very exposed, and then you get to see the kind of output and the productivity. If you put it side by side, it don't seem, to balance sometimes. And then you now ask yourself, there is this paradox most people have a challenge with Nigeria, which is they'll tell you Nigerians are one of the most read, people in the world that are doing extremely very well, until you now ask, how come the country is not reflecting that scope of reading, that scholarship at the end of the day? Because there's a paradox that says that if you are not very, very careful in how the environment works, it has a way of providing some kind of stunted experience. For instance, the research I just showed you now is actually doctrinal work. The Nigerian Emotional Map. What we did was to trace using that to lay foundation so that you understand the depth of what has been the history of Nigeria for about 1800 over the years to the coup, to 1960, to all of them, the different government, the military government, average Nigeria. What you may call the ancestral emotional trauma that over the years, what are the impacts that it has on an average Nigeria, and how does it affect citizenship and the rest of them? And one of the things we learned was that the entire emotional exposure to a very rough terrain has created what we call the 4 archetypes of what makes up an average Nigerian, which is where someone you see is working perhaps in the federal service of Nigeria and is taking salary from Nigeria, is holding the passport of Nigeria, but identity crisis. You are in a place, you are part of it, but somehow you don't believe in it. So what that tells you is that there's a level of heightened emotional experience that you can develop to the point that your prefrontal cortex will now reduce its work, and then most of the experience will now move to what you call the amygdala. And don't forget, in neuroscience, the work of the amygdala, it knows only two basic things. The first one is fight or fight. So the amygdala is the emotional the junction box that causes fight or flight. But the prefrontal cortex is where you think through things. That is where you have strategic thinking and the rest of them. So if you are exposed to a toxic environment for too long, the role of the prefrontal cortex will now reduce. You now have a very heightened emotions. And that is why I felt it was very necessary that what we're going to use to measure health should be safety. That was why I felt it's very important that whatever we're doing, whatever model we're introducing, it is very necessary to look at this human-centered definition of living. Let's use that to measure, because anytime anybody is exposed to consistent toxic environment, consistent environment that is not too healthy, then what do you mean? You are going to reduce the person prefrontal cortex that is actually focused on creativity and innovation. And then you push the person to become more emotional. And that is where the person develops a lot of cortisol. And if you know what cortisol does to the body, after a while, prolonged cortisol brings stress. Stress in a prolonged manner is actually what gives birth to inflammation in the cells and eventually to the tissues, then eventually to the organs, then eventually to the entire body. So the game is quite simple. When the environment is healthy enough, the persons are healthy enough to deliver. But when the environment is not healthy enough, you're taking away that emotional and psychological energy they need to deliver. So we have to just make a choice to decide who and what do we want to create. And I want to say this last language here I want to live with. I've been doing a lot of training, in the corporate world. And of recent, I've been doing some trainings with those who are about to retire and those that have retired. I don't know how, for most of you that have experienced that, you meet most people, they look sapped, as if somebody just used straw, place it on them and then suck every energy and meaning out of them. So how do you spend 30 years in a place of work, and rather than coming out and feeling rejuvenating enough to be able to even contribute back to the society, you're feeling drained? That tells you something is just not okay in the belt of what we're doing so far.
Thank you for sharing that. I don't think there's any organization that starts with a mindset to drain its employee, because again, if they are drained, they can put out their best outputs. And so I will think in the drawing board, when they are building up the different systems and templates through which the organizations operate, they will assume that that's the best template to approach. And I'm speaking this way because the next question I want to throw to Kelvin. Kelvin, can you confirm that you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Okay, the next question that I want to throw to you is something that I'm seeing organizations begin to do, and I'm wondering if it's as effective as they intend to achieve. And the question is this: does more screen and tech time lead to better outputs in the workspace? And how does it relate to multitasking? Because you see organizations where you have to clock in, there are softwares that have to keep you, that help ensure that you are on the screen, you're not leaving. Does more screen time, does more tech time lead to better outputs in workspaces?
Well, thank you. I just want to start off from where the last speaker, Mr. Victor, has actually left. And you have actually questioned that. Why is it that the workplace design is really never meant to drain people's energy? There is a saying that is very common that goes that the road to hell is full of good intention. How does that really relate to what we are doing? Really, as we are designing our workplaces, we are really never meaning bad. We all mean to grow and to get the best out of the people that we are working with. But because our systems are almost optimized for productivity, then the workplace is overly supercharged with systems that work like straw, like the Victor has actually pointed, that drains our energy. And this is overly, like today we can see screens all over because leaders or workplace proprietors think like more speed means more work. But really, this is not as such, because I'm seeing like the last speakers actually shared, Kenya is as well really perceived to be hosting one of the greatest brains in Africa, just like you are saying in Nigeria. And so this now becomes a fallacy that all of us are riding on. And what happens in the long run, we are really copy pasting, because that is what the screens, too much screens around us, allow us to do. They don't give us the time and focus to actually build and be unique to ourselves. There's actually a statistic that shows in Kenya, 85% of startups fail the test of getting into their second anniversary. And most of these startups, of course, are very young people starting them up with the hope of building them into bigger multi-million companies. The question is, what is really happening? And when this happens, when the work stations, we think like we want to copy paste and say like, what I need is more computers around me. What I need is more connectivity around me, and then the work will be happening. I really think when we look at it in that sense, we will not really be finding meaning into our work. It won't really be relating to us. Rather than we will be doing it based on how else somebody else wants to do it. Somebody else did it and succeeded. Now, when we narrow it down to specifically into a workplace system, people want to do more things. And statistics also shows that 40% of productivity is actually lost in the process of trying to multitask, because the energy you consume when you are switching from one app to the other, one task to the other, what Carl Newpoint, the author of Deep Work, refers to as context switching, drains you and reduces your level of productivity to 40%. So then I would really then say it is not really about how much you can do, but it's about the quality of work that comes with what you do. And that is why our work design and systems have to be designed in a manner and sense that appreciate the worker, that appreciates the person, not the system. Because the more we try to appreciate the system, the more we try to jump from one system to the other, the more we are losing our humanity. You are losing meaning in the process because of the draining that happens, just like other speakers have actually talked about. So yes, I would say more work does not really mean productivity in itself, and it also doesn't give us meaning. There's a joke in Brazil that they say, when I was trying to dig deep into the infestation of screens in classrooms and learning areas, I came across a phrase that says that school today is some place where students go and they pretend to learn, whereas teachers go there to pretend to teach. Why? Because the screens are taking a better part of the humanity around them. So every other person is pretending. In the same way, that is what also reflects in our workplaces. With more screens, we are all pretending to get busy because we think that busy means productivity, busy means creativity, busy means more. But at the end of the day, we go back home having pretended that we are at work, we are tired, we are exhausted, we can't do any other thing, because every other time we took our time switching from one task to the other, only trying to buy time to the next time when we'll be leaving offices to go back home. With a tired mind, we cannot engage and talk to our parents or siblings or spouses because all the energy has been drained. Unfortunately, despite all the energy being drained, when we go back home to the office and even when we start reflecting, we do not even have that time because we are at home again with our screens attached to our phones, looking at watching at TV, watching at news. We go to work, we don't rest, we lose sleep, and so we slow with time. Our connectivity actually reduces our concentration level. It heightens our anxiety and depression. And so we start just like we are trying to cope rather than living a life that is productive, creative, and actually help to sustain our system and the families. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I think that's one of the reasons why one of the end goals of this summit is to see how we can begin to thrive across the different tracks that we are focusing on. And you're absolutely spot on to say that being busy isn't directly proportional to productivity. We are entering into an era where everybody wants to seem busy. So there are even a group of people that are actually busy. There are a group of people that just want to seem busy in the name of being productive, but both do not link. And again, to the concept of task switching, research shows that it takes an average of 7 to 23 minutes to regain focus. So for every time that you task switch, it takes an average of 7 to 23 minutes to regain focus. So you can imagine if you have a task to deliver. And one of the questions we must even begin to ask ourselves is that when we begin to engage in distracted times as a product of screen time, what are the things that are distracting us? Because if you have a project to deliver, for instance, and you are auditing your day and what distracted you was WhatsApp status, for instance, weigh the value. Because a lot of times, if you review the things that are actually distracting us, they are of no value to who we are and want to be. Neil L., the author of Indistractable, there's a quote he said that I love. You can't call something a distraction if you don't know what it is distracting you from. The conversation we're having today is not about organizations not engaging in technology use, not spending time within Scrum, because there's hardly anything that you want to do now that doesn't require one form of technology or the other. The conversation we're having is, can we begin to build structures? Can we begin to build systems across how we engage with technology? So it's not just about let's be more tech involved. Is yes, how can we use this technology to achieve our goals? But there are structures, systems, and templates that keep us in tune. Chime, I would like to ask in regards to what I just said now, because I want us to begin to look at it from a solution perspective, how can African organizations address the mental health strain in the workplace and still build connection in remote and hybrid work environments? Because we can't deny it, we are in an era of technology. Pretending that doesn't exist is not going to solve anything. How can African organizations begin to address this?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think that we need to understand African organizations and that face a challenge that a lot of other regions don't experience. And so our employees or members of the workforce aren't just thinking about the task, they're also thinking about things like the internet, will it drop? They're also thinking about whether power will go out. They're also thinking about, managers that don't have any respect for boundaries. Because our HR culture here isn't like other systems, and the infrastructure, unfortunately, isn't a challenge. And so we have to think about that in context. A lot of times we're just designing around the workplace and we're not understanding the infrastructure challenges that impact African organizations and impact well-being. And that is, we had conversations around, going back from in Lagos, from Nigeria, going from Third Mainland Bridge and being in hours of traffic. These are all things that impact well-being, regardless if it's digital or non-digital. We have to understand these type of costs. And so when we think about this constant background stress drains mental energy. And there's research from neuroeconomics, Paul Zeke. He published in Harvard Business Review, and he found that employees in high trust organizations report 74% less stress, have 106% more energy to work, and are 50% higher productive. So organizations that support some of these infrastructure challenges, whether it's providing credit and data, whether providing internet for individuals, it builds trust within an organization, within even remote employees, that isn't just a cultural value, but it's a performance strategy, allowing for an organization to help support some of those infrastructure challenges. So, we have some, even in this small conversation, we're having some inner challenges and things like that. Maybe looking connecting your employees to MTN high-speed internet or Starlink and things like that. Those are some of the things that help build connection and also build trust within the organization, solving those challenges. The other thing we have to think about is that another important question is, how do we build the kind of trust in these digital environments? And it starts on a focus on presence and outcomes, which is a theme that we've been discussed. And for a lot of people, where we're obsessing with people being online, it creates anxiety. But do we make sure, even in remote and hybrid environments, that they're showed goals and results, that people feel the trusted, and they tend to perform better. And you see that in asynchronous organizations like Andela. Andela is an African startup organization that grew and spread. And one of the things that it emphasizes the different time zones and communication patterns. And so it was about the shared goals of individuals versus just being available in the digital space. The other thing I'd like to say is that though trust is important, I do think we need to be thinking about helping employees with tools to handle their own mental resilience. There's a host of organizations that we can be thinking about that specialize in digital wellness tools, and they can be part of the employee benefits that we share. We think about, there's Western products like Better Health and Calm, et cetera, like that, but there's organizations on the continent that we can be supporting that can help our employees and also provide wellness services. One is Nguvu Health in Nigeria. It's a fantastic homegrown platform that connects users with licensed African therapists. One of the reasons I really love it is because of its affordability and cultural alignment. It makes professional therapy accessible via video and text right from the smartphone. That could be a benefit. There's Wazi in Kenya. I think our brother Calvin is there. They offer an excellent model for anonymous SMS-based counseling. So it's a necessary in some regions where internet bandwidth might be an issue and they might be low. So if you have things like mobile texting, you can get some of the support where it's not just a luxury for those who are connected, but also those who are not connected. There's Friend in Pal. That's another one that's AI powered. It's a multilingual platform from Nigeria. Its ability to offer support in local languages across Africa is a game changer for things around inclusivity and breaking down stigma often associated with English-only clinics, so they don't just think it's something for the white man. A lot of people don't know that the burden of mental health conditions is actually in low and middle income countries. It's not in high net worth countries. The burden of suicides is in low and middle income countries. People don't know that Africa has the highest suicide rate in the world. I'm going to say what I said again. Africa, as a region, has the highest suicide rate in the world. So we need to be thinking about indigenous solutions to support our own mental health challenges. We need to be elevating digital tools with a culture that prioritizes things around human connection, starting with something so simple as in-person check-ins rather than just status updates. So we need to create workplace cultures that provide tools for individuals, but also connect on a human level with individuals, not just what is the assignment. And technology can help us and should help us make those decisions, especially if we make those tools accessible for our employees.
Well said, well said. This is where you do mic drop.
Mic drop. Can I say one more? I'm going to say one more thing.
Absolutely.
I'm going to say one more thing about this. Maybe I shouldn't say it in this space, but I'm going to say it anyway, because somebody can, how people, when you share an idea, people just do it. But we have Nigerian Mental Health actually has something that's coming out soon. We're evaluating digital behavioral health apps across Africa, and we're ranking them. And so these ones that I got is actually part of a larger project. So if people are interested in that, they can follow us at Nigerian Mental Health. Because we are very interested in how AI and technology is impacting the behavioral health landscape, and not just how it's impacting it, what recommendations we should have. Because it's one thing to say give visibility, it's another thing to say point people in the right direction. And so we want to use systems where we evaluate these tools. And so employers, institutions, and other individuals can really take advantage of some of these new technologies that are becoming available to support mental resilience.
Yeah, thank you for that. There's a question in the chat box. I will be coming to that very shortly because it's very linked to what you just shared. Mr. Victor, can you hear me? Mr. Victor, can you hear me? Okay, I'll come back to that question. I think the network is, we're having a bit of technical challenge. Kelvin, I wanted to ask, how do employees ensure a healthy work environment that builds human capacity in our digitally saturated world? I mean, this adds up to what Chime just spoke about, and how best for us to achieve employee wellness, especially since we're seeing a lot of burnouts currently. Did you get that?
Yes, I did. So thank you. I would really have to borrow from what you said yesterday. You said that wellness as it is today is not automatic. It has to be automated. I think that was a very powerful statement that I got from your presentation yesterday. And also borrowing from all the rest who did their presentation yesterday, one thing that is clear that we are in the era of intentionality. So it is not unless you intentionally seek for something, you really don't get it, because nothing is really automatic, rather than the oxygen that the good Lord has actually given to us. In other thing, you have to work and sweat for it. So really, in the workplace as it is today, wellness don't come automatically, because every other thing is actually optimized for profit and productivity. So then, in the spaces of work, how do then employees really ensure that their employers get the maximum, live the life they really need to live, even when they come to work? And I'm also looking at this in the sense that today workplace would even mean somebody's bedroom where you are just seated and you are working. So as at that personal level, or it could mean somebody's kitchen where they are seated, or maybe preparing some meal and they're working. So when you really don't have time to work, I also borrowed this from you yesterday. When you really don't have some time to work, you will always find yourself working throughout the day. And now, even if that is the case, how much then do you, at what cost will you be working 24 hours, 24/7 in a day? At what cost? How much will you be making in the process? And how much are you most likely to lose? Remember that we have already learned here that 40% of people trying to multitask always lose in the process of productivity. So employees then have to design their workplaces in the sense and manner that also appreciate human development and wellness. So one of the things that they really need to do, or rather all of us really need to do when we are doing this, is to have scheduled work. Like you say that you know very well that you are going to do some specific work. That work is going to take 2 hours. Then let it be within that period. One of the things that I've actually seen work for me is that when I'm doing work on laptop or computer, I ensure that I don't get everything that I need for that period. I ensure that I don't bring water with me. I ensure that I don't make it comfortable. I actually make it as difficult as possible for me so that I move around. So that when I feel like I'm thirsty, I should go and find water. When I feel like I need something, I should actually go find it. So I ensure that I don't put everything on the desk. That is one trick that actually works for me. When I do that, then it enables me to feel uncomfortable in the process of work, and also it also reduces distracts me into watching too much screen. I think that also workplaces need, that is when somebody is doing their personal work. But another thing that also employees need to do in an environment where they have got employees is that they have to provide breaks, screen break sessions. And this screen break session have to also be replaced by something that is not entirely screen-based. And I like the fact that yesterday you talked about no gadget hangouts where you are talking about cards. This is actually the right moment where employees really need to think about cards to play, to engage. An employee for the process and the to also appreciate Ubuntu, the spirit of the African spirit of oneness, collectivity. This is a time where an employee employers really need to encourage people getting out of their desks, going to find about what others are also doing, so that they can also learn. In the process, they actually switch off from the cognitive overload, where they were so much focused on their screens. And I think that also employees need to do is to encourage more one-on-one engagement, team building sessions that are not necessarily online, so that employees really need to break the boredom, the over-connectivity, and also get to engage one-on-one. And I think that employees also have to design their workplace in the sense that distraction have to be minimal, and this distraction always come in the form of message apps. We live in an era where availability is too common. Everybody is just too much available, and in the process, we are reducing our value as a people. We are actually not appreciating that scarcity brings value. For that matter, even when we know that there are companies that don't highly depend on responses, then how do we then even schedule these responses to meet to be done at a specific time and place, so that employees also get time to process information, to also fill it before they respond. So doing emails at a specific time will work perfectly for others, and also doing one-on-one sessions. Then lastly, employees also have to design their work environment to appreciate the fact that when an employer is not at work, then work should not be extended at their free time. And in Kenya, there was a very big effort of introducing the right to disconnect. So the right to disconnect was a bill that was introduced in Kenya in the Senate around 2023. It was not passed at the parliament, but it was seeking to entrench to ensure that employers do not exploit employees to the extent that somebody is off work, but they can still be reached, and for that reason, they are still working. So when employees actually design it in a manner that they ensure that when people are not at work, then that is their personal time. They should actually engage with the family, friends, and live a personal life. Then that means that every other person's personal life is also appreciated. Because again, truth is, I want to African as who once said that there is enough for our need, but there will never be really enough for our greed. So even when we think that over-engagement, constant busyness will provide that level of productivity that thinks that will be always curing our greed, we will eventually be losing it, because in the process, we'll be losing the basic ability to also sustain our health, which is very important, our relationship with our friends, which is very important, our relationship with self, which is very important, and relationship with our environment. Thank you.
Thank you. At the end of the day,
Olu, I'm sorry, unmute yourself. Forgive me.
yeah. Thank you for that, Kelvin, because at the end of the day, if you want as an employer, or if you're employing yourself, at the end of the day, if you want balance, if you want the best of output, there needs to be balance in how you approach your employees, or in how you approach your freelance work. And again, like I said yesterday, balance is not 50-50, because work-life balance, if you've done enough research, you realize that you can't get that work-life balance. And so the concept of balance is not 50-50. The concept of balance is that your professional life is protected, your personal life is protected, and your social life is protected. Because if you are killing it in your professional life and your personal life is frustrated, you are still not well. If you are killing it in your personal life and your professional life is not protected, that balance is not there. So there has to be, across these three ecosystems. There's a very important question that is in the chat box, and I wanted to leave this question for the last as we begin to wrap up, because we've spoken a lot about certain solutions that organizations can begin to apply. But we must also consider that individuals are different. And so, Mr. Victor, I would like to ask, what role does individual differences play, since not all brain respond in the same way? For example, digital literacy, age, cognitive capacity, neurodiversity, cultural context, to the solutions that Chime has spoken about, you mentioned during your keynote, Kelvin spoke about. How can we look at this, stepping it down now, considering that individuals are not the same?
Yeah, thank you so much. The thoughts and the contribution are quite valid. I will take it from one major perspective. To be honest, one of the things we lost in Africa, which we are trying to gain back, and I see the quality of the discussion here and the emphasis on intentionality, is that we lost what I call mental sovereignty. You see, before the digital space, there is still values, there are still principles, there are still traditions, there are still standards. Now, when as a person,
Give him a moment. Olu, you want to move on and come back?
Yes.
I think,
Okay, we lost you for a bit. Can you just
wow.
restart, and then you have just 2 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, but basically what I'm saying is that what we lost is that mental sovereignty. Everything we do in the digital world today, we learned it. And so the first thing, and if you don't have that values, at the point you go to the negotiation table, you are going to miss it. So whether at an individual level or at a collective level, what it matters the most is that we must recover our mental sovereignty, the capacity to say no when it's not okay, the capacity to say a thing might be used in Europe, it might be used in the US, but it's not okay for us in Africa. That capacity to say, yes, the thing is global, but we have the sovereignty to pick and choose what sits with us. You either do that individually or you do that collectively. That, for me, is the bottom line. If you can get that mental sovereignty, we will be so sure to pick what we want and reject what we don't want. That we will be able to engage whatever comes our way.
Thank you so much for that. We have just 2 more minutes to begin to wrap up. So I will just ask, in 30 minutes, we are all a representation of different organizations here. If there was one word or one message that you will want every individual, either an owner of an organization or an employee of an organization, to live with, what will that be? And I'll start with you, Chime.
Trust. Trust is the most important. I think trust to share your ideas. I think trust in your organization. I think trust in your fellow members, that they have your well-being at heart. Do things that instill trust, and that means showing up. That means supporting infrastructure. That means check-in. So I think trust is the most important thing for providing well-being within an organization.
Thank you for sharing that. That speaks to the safety pillar that Mr. Victor spoke about during his keynote. Kelvin, in 30 seconds.
Well, because we are talking this about Africa, and then Africa then becomes our greatest business. Africanization then is built on the ability of people to share, and sharing meaning building communities, and always being mindful. So I really would like us to, whenever we are building, let's not build for the optimization of profits, but let's build for the ability for us to share with our people and share our values and morals as Africans. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And again, that goes to meaning in the pillars that Mr. Victor shared. Mr. Victor, over to you.
Mental sovereignty. we should have that capacity to say no to what we shouldn't accept and say yes to what sits with us. Oftentimes, life will throw a lot of options available for you, whether in models, practice, and adaptation. One of the most important things is that capacity to make decisions, that sovereignty to say no to what doesn't work and yes to what you're comfortable with, even if we're dealing with shared environment. Because sometimes the challenge is that we know what we want, but it seems to be as if we don't have that capacity to be able to reject what we don't want. So at the end of the day, we find ourselves in a mix where we are caught up between what we want and what is available. So I think mental sovereignty is very important. Be mentally independent enough to say no when it's necessary to say no, and yes to when you think it is very important to say yes. I think that would be my keyword.
Thank you so much. And like we said yesterday, what we're doing with this summit is to ignite the conversation. And so there are a lot of concepts that have been shared that we need to go back and begin to explore. We need to, as leaders, as founders, hold a roundtable conversation with key players in our organizations and see how we can begin from this conference to reevaluate the structures and the templates and the systems that we're using to build the things that we're building. I must especially say thank you to our panelists, Chime, the founder of Nigerian Mental Health. Thank you so much for taking out time to join this conversation. Mr. Kelvin, the founder of Digital Health and Education Network Kenya. Thank you so much for taking out time to join this conversation. Mr. Victor Prince Dickson, the transformer, the founder of MTech. Thank you so much for taking out time to join this conversation.